the value of resourcefulness,
Yeah.
right? And self-reliance. How do you apply that to the work that you do on a daily basis? How do you?
Well, I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs and people pursuing dreams and passions in this God. And you always the whole point of moving things forward is you run into problems, you run into failures, things don't work. You have to back up and try again. Each one of those times when you have a setback and you back up and you try again, you're using resourcefulness, you're using self-reliance, you're trying to invent your way out of a box. And we have tons of examples at Amazon where we've had to do this. We've failed so many times. I always think of us as a great place to fail because we're good at it. We have so much practice. And just to give you one example, many years ago now, we wanted a third-party selling business because we knew we could add selection to the store that way. And we started Amazon auctions. Nobody came. I think maybe our mother is the only one who purchased something on Amazon auctions.
I bought a coffee cup.
You got a coffee cup?
I did.
Okay, so there were two purchasers. And then we said, well, what can we do? We opened this thing called Z Shops, which was like fixed price auctions. Again, nobody came.
I didn't use that.
And then finally, and each one of these failures is like a year and a half long. And so we're trying to invent new things. And we finally came across this idea of putting the third-party selection on the same detail pages, the same product detail pages that we had our own inventory on, our own retail inventory on. We called this Marketplace, and it started working right away. So that resourcefulness of trying new things, figuring things out, what do customers really want, it pays off in everything. And it pays off even in your daily lives. How do you help your children? What's the right thing? My wife has a great saying. We let our kids use, even now they're 17 through 12, but even when they were 4, we would let them use sharp knives. And by the time they were, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, we would let them use certain power tools. And my wife, much to her credit, she has this great saying. She says, I would much rather have a kid with 9 fingers than a resourceless kid. Which I just think is a fantastic attitude about life.
You were 30 years old in 1994 when you decided to start Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm.
You had a great job. I remember you had a great apartment on the Upper West Side.
I've been married for a year.
You've been married for a year.
I had not been eating biscuits for 9 months.
And I'm just, how did you go through making the decision to drop what was a very good job and take this chance? It all seems very obvious now, right? This many years later that it paid off, but at the time it was not obvious.
No, it wasn't. And I did do a lot of soul searching. I went to my boss at the time, and I really liked my job. And I told my boss I was going to go do this thing, start an internet bookstore. And I'd already told my wife, and she's like, "Great, let's go." And I said to my boss, I was going to do this. He's like, "This is a good idea." He said, "I think this is a good idea, but it would be an even better idea for somebody who didn't already have a good job." And that sort of made some logical sense to me, and he convinced me to think about it for a couple of days. So I went away, and I was really trying to get my head around how to think about this. And I think, for me, the right way to make that kind of very personal decision, because those decisions are personal. They're not like data-driven business decisions. They are, what does your heart say? And for me, the best way to think about it was to project myself forward to age 80 and say, look, when I'm 80 years old, I want to have minimized the number of regrets that I have. I don't want to be 80 years old in a quiet moment of reflection, thinking back over my life and cataloging a bunch of major regrets. And I think that regrets, our biggest regrets, in most cases, you can murder somebody, okay, you'd regret that. But in most cases, our biggest regrets turn out to be acts of omission. It's paths not taken, and they haunt us. We wonder, what would have happened? I loved that person, and I never told them. And then they married somebody else. I didn't do this. And so that's the frame of mind that I put myself in. And once I did that, once I thought about it that way, it was immediately obvious to me. I knew that when I'm 80, I would never regret trying this thing that I was super excited about and it failing. If it failed, fine. I would be very proud of the fact when I'm 80 that I tried. And I also knew that it would always haunt me if I didn't try. And so that would be a regret. It would be a 100% chance of a regret if I didn't try, and basically a 0% chance of regret if I tried and failed. So I think that's a useful metric for any important life decision.
Same thing when you're, with your kids, and it's how do you? I don't have a fraction of the responsibility that you do, and I find that I'm always wrestling with, my phone. I'm just curious, like, what sort of discipline or what sort of, how do you go about compartmentalizing the way that you do?
I do not. So like when I have dinner, whether it's with friends or with my family, and I like to be talking to the people I'm with. I like to do whatever I'm doing. I don't like to multitask. It bothers me. If I'm reading my email, I want to be really reading my email. My mom tells a story about me being in Montessori school, and that they couldn't get me to switch tasks. So the Montessori school teacher would have to literally pick up my chair and just move me to the next task station. So I don't know. It's not like
it's not intentional.
I don't need discipline in order to not be checking my email. For me, it's very natural. I love being present in what I'm working, and I'm happy multitasking, but I do it serially. I will spend, and honestly, if something really important is happening, somebody will find me. It's not like I have to check my text messages every 5 minutes or something like that. That's not a big deal.
Right. And usually when they do find you, it's rarely to give you good news.
Oh yeah, no. If somebody comes and says you need to check your text messages right now, that's got to be bad news. But that's usually, actually, honestly, it's usually a family thing. It's like a medical thing or something. It's like, but it's not. I think that it's probably just a very personal decision. I think some people are very good at multitasking, and so they can do two things at once. And I'm at a restaurant with my wife or something, and we'll see a couple both texting, but every once in a while they show each other their phones, and it seems like they're having a very nice date. So I'm not sure there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
It's just not how I'm wired.
Got it. So, going back to this sense of adventure, can you talk to me a little bit about what the role that adventure plays in your life, and what is it that it brings to you? It's more than just a distraction.
Yeah. No. So that when I say to adventure fellowship, for me, adventure is you can choose. We all get to choose our life stories, and it's the choices that define us, not our gifts. Everybody in this room has many gifts. I have many gifts. You can never be proud of your gifts because they're gifts. They were given to you. You might be, tall, or you might be really good at math, or you might be extremely beautiful or handsome, or there are many gifts, and you can only be proud really of your choices, because those are the things that you are acting on. And one of the most important choices that each of us has, and you know this just as well as I do, is you can choose a life of ease and comfort, or you can choose a life of service and adventure.
How do you go about establishing that work-life balance that everybody, talks about and thinks about? You've got, you live a big life, right? And how do you
I get this question a lot. I get it. I teach senior executive kind of leadership classes at Amazon for our most senior execs, and I also teach, or not teach, but I also speak to interns, so kind of all across the spectrum. And I get this question about work-life balance all the time from both ends of the spectrum. And my view is I don't even like the phrase work-life balance. I think it's misleading. I like the phrase work-life harmony, because I know that if I am energized at work, happy at work, feeling like I'm adding value, part of a team, whatever energizes you, that makes me better at home. It makes me a better husband, a better father, and likewise, if I'm happy at home, it makes me a better employee, a better boss, all the things. it's not primarily about, there may be crunch periods where it's about the number of hours in the week, but that's not the real thing. Usually it's about, do you have energy? And is your work depriving you of energy, or is your work generating energy for you? And there are people, everybody in this room knows people who fall into these two camps. You're in a meeting, and the person comes in the room. Some people come into the meeting, and they add energy to the meeting. Other people come into the meeting, and the whole meeting just deflates. And those people they drain energy from the meeting. And you have to decide which of those kinds of people you're going to be. Are you going to add energy?
And the same thing at home.
And the same thing at home. And it's a wheel, it's a cycle, it's a flywheel, it's a circle. It's not a balance. Because a balance, that's why that metaphor is so dangerous, because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And you could be out of work, have all the time for your family in the world, but really depressed and demoralized about your work situation, and your family wouldn't want to be anywhere near you. They would wish you would take a vacation from them. And so it's not about the number of hours, not primarily. I suppose if you went crazy with 100 hours a week or something, yeah, that maybe there are limits, and they probably. But I've never had a problem, and I think it's because both sides of my life give me energy, and that's what I would recommend. And that's what I do recommend to interns and execs.